So here we are, we're going to be talking about the Job Search Strategy Workshop. We're going to be talking about interviewing. So I'm joined here with Ryan Murphy, my colleague, and this is what we're going to be going over. The outline and objectives of today, what the interviewers are looking for, the types of interview questions that you could potentially get, interview prep, what to do, and then the day of the interview, both in person and virtual, now that things are becoming more virtual. And then kind of talking through an interview in action, and then debriefing that as well. So this is something from our NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, basically just rating what employers are looking for from their candidates. So basically the skills and the qualities and how much they would prefer certain qualities over others. So just looking at this, ability to work in a team structure, ability to verbally communicate with persons inside and outside the organization, to make decisions and solve problems. So all of these things, you'll be able to display within that interview. You'll be able to see all of these skills. So the types of interview questions could be a traditional question versus a behavioral question. So behavioral question is really something that will start out, tell me about a time when, you performed a task and it went not exactly as planned, and how did you handle that situation? So the best way to go about that, to go about answering that question, is to think about the STAR method. So to think about the situation that you were in, the task or the challenge that you were facing, what your action was, and then the result of that action. It'll keep you on target to kind of answer that question as a whole, and it keeps you from rambling and maybe going off on tangents and things like that. It's definitely worth it to kind of practice those questions, and that's something that we can do as well. We can do mock interviews with you. So the types of interview questions we talked about, the STAR method. So here's an example of the STAR method. So describe a situation where you worked on a team, what role did you assume, and what was the outcome. So this specific person's answer was, in my consumer behavior class, I was paired with 3 classmates for a group project to deliver a global marketing campaign for a large shoe manufacturer. Since nobody assumed lead within this group, I decided to take the effort by delegating tasks, and then the result was that it was successful and they got an A. So that's one way to kind of keep yourself on target with answering that question completely, and not going off on any other tangents. So next is preparing for the interview. So you want to make sure you do a self-assessment. So thinking about, because they're going to ask you questions like, what are things that you're interested in? And so you want to make sure that you have those answers ahead of time and that you're not kind of scrambling during that moment. You also want to make sure that you research the employer. You want to know if they are, doing any new projects, if that's something that they're sharing with the public, making sure that you're checking their website, just being familiar with the company, what they stand for, what their mission is, what their goals are, making sure that you know that company. And then you want to practice the interview. So like I said, we can always do a mock interview with you. We could do a virtual one. When the time comes and we can be in person, we can do an in-person one as well. So just, making sure that you kind of get the jitters out that way. You can always use us for that case. And then compile relevant information and material. So like I said, making sure that you're doing your research, making sure that you're, as with the next point, is having questions for the employer. So making sure that you come prepared to ask them questions, because they're going to have a time where they're going to say, do you have any questions for us? And you want to make sure that you have something to ask them, because if you don't, it kind of looks as if you're not really that interested. So just making sure that you are prepared to ask some questions. All right. So here are some questions that you might be asked, which can kind of trip you up a little bit. So just making sure that you practice these questions and think about how you would answer them. So tell me about yourself, because that's such a broad topic, and there are so many different facets of yourself. You really want to make sure that you have certain points that you want to make sure that you hit when you're talking to the employer. And in the next slide, I'll go into a little bit more about the tell me about yourself question. Also, they could ask you, why are you interested in working at, for instance, the Chestnut Hill Corporation or whatever the company is. So making sure that you know why you even want to work for that company, because they know everyone needs a job, but why do you want to work for them specifically? And then describe a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done. What accomplishment has given you the most satisfaction and why? Because these are things that you would have to really think about, going through your history of your career. What are some things that, were really good for you, and what accomplishments are you really proud of? And then naming your strengths and your weaknesses. Although I have heard that companies don't really ask this question anymore, because they know that a lot of people are using that, their weakness, quote unquote, as a strength. But always good just to have that on there anyway, just to kind of like make sure that you have a way to answer those questions. So with the tell me about yourself question, this is really an opportunity to make a good first impression. It's a time to convince the employer that they made a good decision to interview you. So let the employer know something about you that's not on your resume, because anything that you're going to say that's from your resume, they're going to say, yeah, we do know that. So tell us something else. So making sure that you have something else to talk about. It's time to demonstrate your confidence, to be clear and articulate with your communication skills, because they're looking for that. And then to also introduce yourself to the employer, but also to explain why you're an excellent candidate for that position and the company. And you want to, like I said, not make sure that it's just kind of regurgitating information from your resume. So here's some other questions to think about and to make sure that you have prepared. Tell me about a time in which you had to use your written communication skills in order to get an important point across. How do you think a friend or professor who knows you well would describe you? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your long-term plans? Tell me something about yourself that is not on your resume. And then, like I said, what questions do you have for me? So these are all very, questions that we hear from employers that they're asking potential candidates. So it's good to have answers for all of those. So then with the day of in-person interview, some things that you want to do when we get to that point, when you actually can go and visit them in person, is to review the directions of the place, making sure you know where you're going, making sure you know if there's any construction on the road on the way there or on the way back. Make sure you know where to park, things like that. If you need to pay for parking, and how much is that, and what does that look like, all of that stuff. You want to make sure that you always dress to impress. Even if it's a job that you've heard about from a friend and they say, oh no, dress is very casual, you still want to dress in a suit. You still want to make sure that you are looking better than you think that you would. Making sure that you're prepared for that. Make sure you arrive early, and know that the interview starts in the parking lot. We've heard so many times where the higher up CEO asks the secretary who's at the front desk, how was this candidate when they came in? How were they to you? So making sure that you're always, you're being nice to everyone around you. It's good just to do that anyway. It's good to be the dear neighbor. But yes, always making sure that you're arriving early, making sure that you smile, making sure that you bring supplies. So bringing that piece of paper with questions on it if you want, bringing a pen so that you can write down anything that you're thinking during the interview. Also making sure that you are writing down who's there, who's actually interviewing you, and their email addresses, so that you can eventually send a thank you, which we will get to as well. So being prepared, expecting a dialogue. It's not always going to be just question, answer, question, answer. A lot of companies and a lot of employers are looking for just, who are you as a person? Do you fit with this climate that we've created here at this company? So making sure that you're ready just to have that ease of a conversation. And know that it's okay to pause and collect your thoughts. If you get to a point where they're asking a question and you just don't really have an answer just yet, like you just can't think of that answer, you can always say like, hey, can we come back to this question? I just want to think about it for a little bit before I answer. And then for the day of, for the virtual interview, Some things that you want to make sure that you're always checking is check your Wi-Fi connection, make sure that it's working. Also to dress to impress, even though you are going to be just on a computer screen, to make sure that you're still dressing that part, because that will come off in your posture and the way that you talk. It's always helpful to be dressed and prepared in that way. To smile at the camera and not at the screen. I'm still struggling with that one. Because making sure that you're looking at the person is really you're looking at the camera, and not the screen where the person is. To bring supplies, be prepared. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you have a pen and paper with you to write them down. Same kind of thing, expecting a dialogue, pausing and collecting your thoughts. To also be sure to check your background. You want to make sure that you have kind of like an office-like setting behind you, or just a plain background behind you. You don't want to have anything look too busy or there are too many people around. Make sure that your lighting is okay. So I've been on a couple of calls with students where there's windows behind them, and that bright light kind of makes them go kind of invisible. You can't really see them at that point. So you want to make sure that the light is in front of you. And then making sure that you're in a quiet space with no other interruptions for people to walk in, or anything like that. Okay, and then during the interview, things that you want to make sure that you're doing, making sure that you're showing how you match the requirements for the position, making sure you're always being honest. Honesty is always, the number one thing that, employers look for. They're not looking for someone who's going to lie about, the skills that they have or things like that, because that will eventually come out. So it's better just to be as honest as possible. To remember that you are interviewing the employer just as much as they're interviewing you. So making sure that you even want to work for them. Make sure that you have questions where you're going to challenge, what they think, or something, along those lines. And that sometimes you are not going to have an answer to the question. So just being aware that, maybe you can't think of a time because maybe there was no time where something like that happened. Make sure that you're not bad-mouthing anybody at any time, because you just don't know who knows who, and you don't want to burn any bridges that way. And then know that the employer will train you. So with your degree, especially with, being at a liberal arts school, they know that they can always just train you on the specific skills that they want you to have. But they can't, you can't be trained in the passion and enthusiasm that you have for that position or for that job. And then at the end, after the interview is done, making sure that you get the names and contact information of everybody, preferably a business card if you're in person, or maybe just their email address if it's virtual, and then making sure that you follow up with the thank you note within 48 hours, which is good. And then also asking about, timeline and next steps. So thinking forward, what is the next thing that's going to happen? So that way you're not kind of just like, okay, I had the interview and now it's been 2 weeks and I don't know what's happening. When really they're like, oh, we're going to be interviewing people throughout this whole month, so we'll get back to you. So just making sure that you're both on the same page with that. So here's our contact information. So that was very kind of brief, more or less like an overview of, interviewing now. Does anybody have any questions or anything that we haven't addressed that you wanted us to address? We can answer any questions now, or you can always, make a one-on-one appointment with us. Anything? Ryan, anything you wanted to add, or anything that?
No, I thought you did a great job, Andrea. I just want to underscore the one point that you made there at the end about how when you're the interviewee, you're also interviewing that company as far as culture and fit. So obviously you want them to hire you, but you want to make sure that you're speaking with folks in a company that you could see yourself contributing to. You certainly don't want to work for an organization that maybe has conflicting views with your own personal ethics or values. So you want to make sure that it's a culture and a climate that you would see yourself fitting in. And when it comes to do you have any questions for us? Andrea mentioned like asking like, what do you like about working here or things like that. I think that's a terrific question. I also think asking, how long have you been at the organization is a great question to ask, because you can learn quite a bit from that. If you're talking to somebody and, you find out that let's say you're interviewing with 5 different people over the course of the day, and everyone in there is within 3 to 6 months old. That tells you that there's a lot of turnover at this organization. They kind of have a whole new staff, where if you have the same 5 people and this person's been here for 2 years, this person's been there for 7, another person's been there for 5, that tells you that people come to that organization and have some longevity. So you need to kind of balance that with your own sort of personal desires and what you're looking for as far as your career goes.
So Janelle has a question. How do you ask a company about their culture? I don't necessarily think it's asking about their culture. I think it's really kind of when you go into that company, you're checking on their website, you're looking for what their mission is and what their vision is for that company, and you'll see if that's really where you want to be as well. Is that the kind of person you want to be as well? So you're not necessarily saying like, what's the culture like here? You're really kind of reading the room, and you're getting all of that information based on the person who's interviewing you and their style of interview. And like I said, the information that you get on the website as well. Hopefully that was clear enough for you.
Yeah, and a lot of that you can also pick up just from kind of the tenor of the people with whom you're speaking. If everyone is kind of more relaxed and, in between interviews, the one person says like, oh, are we still going to have that softball game on Thursday? Like you can kind of see that maybe it's more of a collegial and friendly atmosphere, as opposed to an organization that may be a bit more professional and sort of buttoned up, where there's not as much socialization outside of the workplace. Not putting a value judgment on either, but you need to decide, where do you see yourself fitting? Do you want to work in an organization where your colleagues are also friends, or an organization where you're just you're going to work, you're doing your thing, and then you're sort of going home to your own friends and family and kind of having that separation? Those are the things we talk about when it comes to culture, and you can pick up a lot of that, as Andrea said, just throughout the course of an interview day.
Okay, any other questions or anything else you want to? All right, great. Well, like I said, you know how to contact us, and you can email us at any time. We can set up a one-on-one Zoom. We can set up phone calls if you're not into doing Zoom. And we can also do, any kind of, mock interview with you. So feel free to reach out to us if you need anything. Otherwise, we will talk to you guys at another time. Oh, wait, we have one more. How do you answer when they say, what motivates you? What is the right answer? Well, I don't know that there is a right answer for that. That's just, it's kind of, doing your own self-assessment and thinking about what does motivate you. I
think you answered genuinely. Yeah. I think that's a great question. I agree with Andrea that we couldn't really tell you how to answer that question because we're not you. If it's the kind of situation where if you're motivated by a lot of autonomy in the workplace, that you like a supervisor who's going to sort of give you a task and allow you to run with it, I think being open and honest about that, where if you're someone who needs and desires a lot of direction so that you make sure that you're meeting every expectation, and that's what motivates you to do a good job, I think you need to be upfront and honest about that as well. But as Andrea said, I think you need to do a lot of sort of self-assessment and analysis to really know yourself and be self-aware if you get a question like that. But always answer honestly. Don't say what you think they want to hear, because eventually that's going to come around and probably bite you in the end. I always err on the side of being completely honest. And if you're motivated by X, Y, or Z, I would be upfront about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question to really think about ahead of time, because trying to come up with something on the fly that one's going to be kind of tough. So you want to make sure that you do have that answered. Also, to look up the company on, is it Glassdoor, Ryan, where they give you the questions that the company could potentially ask. It's what other people have posted to say, like, I've been on an interview at, X, Y, and Z company, and they've asked me the following questions. So knowing that, ahead of time, these are the questions they could potentially ask, I think is helpful too. So it's glassdoor.com.
I believe that's the website. But you just type in Glassdoor in Google, it will come up.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining.